I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation, but Andrew Quo. I'll be darned, but the guy does not take any days off. Andrew Quo, how are you on this gorgeous but frosty Wednesday afternoon?
I'm incredible, but
Yes.
extremely hungover, and not the hungover you think I am. I'm pizza hungover, baby.
Oh, sounds like someone OD'd celebrating National Pizza Day.
That's right. I was overserved, as they say.
Did you actually eat pizza?
I thought about it. You know, it was trending all over Twitter, being like National Pizza Day, and I was checking out all the photos. I was like, maybe I'll hit up our friends at Williamsburg. Maybe I'll hit up our friends at Scars. But I didn't make it.
I have some issues with these National Food Days. I have to
Oh,
be.
do you?
I have to be honest about that.
Wow,
it's
are
something
you
I've-
keeping the National Food Day honest?
I've kept this under my lid for too long. I think yesterday was also National Bagels and Lox Day.
Is every day Catter Day? It seems like every time I log on, it's like, it's Catter Day. I'm like, okay, that sounds good.
Well, today, from my research, is National Cream Cheese Brownie Day. Tomorrow
Excuse me?
is National Peppermint Patty Day. And then after that, you've got National Plum Pudding Day.
What?
Are you celebrating all these things or what?
I am now. Let's go, plum pudding. Let's rock this plum pudding. I don't know.
I am so fucking sick of the national of big plum pudding. There are gummy fingerprints all over my Google Calendar.
What is plum pudding? Okay, so this is a precursor to our pizza discussion, but it sounds like if you're from the home of grime, Dizzy Rascal, I did it. Thank you. Is everything pudding there? Every time I'm like, oh, cool, a recipe for pudding, it looks like bread.
Well, everything is either pudding or eels. It's one of the two. Sometimes it's an eel pudding.
I've heard of this eel pudding. It's pickled eel pudding. Is it a pickle? Is it an eel? Or is it bread?
It's an eel, baby.
Do you like eels?
I have only eaten eels in sushi format. They're not my favorite. They're okay.
When
A lot of people they're divisive though.
are they poor man's food? Is this a class thing? Is this a Bucatine discourse?
I don't think so. I feel as if people have said while ordering sushi, I don't like eel. That's my context.
Oh, it is sweet and it is bony, but when you get a nice little eel, it's very pleasant.
I don't have an issue with eel, and when it comes in the array of sushi, eel to me is fine. But I mean, I feel like we're just glossing over the big issue here. Like, I haven't even taken down my Bagels and Lox decorations, and already it's cream cheese brownie day.
Is every bakery in New York City cream cheese brownie holiday?
I don't know. I haven't even done my peppermint patty day shopping.
Well, what do you mean cream cheese and brown? I guess you put cream cheese in brownies sometimes, right?
There's one day a year when you do.
That actually sounds delicious.
Is it possible that it was really National Pizza Day and Bagels and Lox Day? That feels like, I don't know, some World War II shit.
Man, my phone is reading me like a book these days, but every day is Linsanity. So could we just like put it all together? It's like, on this day, Linsanity. I'm like, yes. Oh, you got me. So what constitutes a pizza, big timer? What do you think of pizza? What makes a pizza? Because, the headline was, is pizza the most versatile food? And I'm like,
sounds like someone's been reading Food Insider again.
oh, yeah. The interns definitely informed me this morning.
Is there any food that has more range than pizza? Were you presenting me with that question, or am
Yeah,
I presenting you with
I
that?
was. You are on the spot. This is the impeachment.
Yeah, the sandwich has more range.
Why?
Because pizza has a crust by default.
But the sandwich has to have bread by the. Isn't it the same thing?
Yeah, but the bread, you can go all over the place. And that opens up your whole... Is a pita a sandwich?
Is a lettuce wrap a sandwich?
Is pita a pizza?
Is a lettuce wrap a pizza? So
My thing is no. No, actually my answer is yes. There is a food that has more range than pizza, and it's a sandwich.
I used to get back in the day when we used to go to restaurants and sit down for pizza, and with other people who would kind of sabotage my pizza fantasy. There would be pies that would come to the table, alleged pizza pies with no red sauce and no cheese, and I'm like, okay, cool. And I think I've griped about this on Cookies before, but when you tell me it's a pizza, I'm like, cool. My mind is open, man. I'm an artist, man. Paint, yeah, cool. Splatter, whatever. And then a pizza comes out, and I'm like, that looks like baked bread with butter on it. Okay, that looks delicious. I'm going to devour it, but you'll be damned to tell me that's a pizza.
You've had a lot of traumatic experiences that involve pizza. I remember you recounting when a horrible man would creep up next to you and steal your pizza. You had a pizza sidler in one of your art studios.
Did I?
You talked about this on Cookies, and I remembered it because you were so hurt that someone would say, I don't want any pizza. When you'd order it, it would arrive.
That's right.
Steamy and fragrant and delicious. And then they would sidle up and say, here's $2. Mind if I grab a slice?
Yeah,
and this haunted you.
He wasn't quite a sidler because he committed up front to split the pizza with me. And then after he looked at it when it came, decided whether or not to actually pay half for it. And if he didn't like the looks of it, he'll say, I'm hungry. I just want to buy one slice, and throw down $3 and walk away.
You're now telling a very different tale, which
No, this is the same tale.
I disagree.
You can disagree, but this is my story. So
Yeah, but I feel like you've edited it because you were called out for the sidling. Well, you were
That's
called
not
out for
quite
calling out sidling.
I love a sidler, and shout out to sidler representation on Cookies Hoops, the most influential pod.
Yeah, no
But-
shaming, no shaming. of
No
the
shaming
sidler.
sidling, and I respect the sidler. But, this was a transaction that was like on the table. I was like, are we going to split a pizza or not? It's like, we're going in. And that's where my gripe happened. We did not split a pizza.
We're going to have to go to the archive, or hopefully someone who has listened to multiple episodes and can remember. Because my belief on this story was that this individual, this sidler, no shaming, would say to you, Quo, I don't want any lunch. I'm not hungry. And you'd say, perfect, a pizza for me. Then it would arrive, and they would say, actually, I just want a slice or two. Here's $4. That was my recollection of this saga of the pizza sidler, who you respect but fear.
The only reason I would call this fake news is because if that happened, I would just give them the pizza. Like, if presented with that situation and a sidler did present themselves, I'd just be like, just take a couple slices, man.
But I think this was their gambit, that they would not come up and say, actually, I'm hungry. Mind if I grab some? They'd come up brandishing a few ones and say, I'm in on this. And you're like, ooh, I kind of had already made my pizza decisions based on you not being involved. So now you're getting your fingers on my pepperoni slice when I had calculated 3 pepperonis for me, no pepperonis for you.
I've never met this person, sort of like someone who is not a COVID expert. They don't exist on Earth.
I'm hoping that someone will go to the tell the tape, because I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to trust you that you've told this story twice, and I believed you both times.
You should do that and stop dodging the question, because
I've already answered yes, there is a food that has more range than pizza.
what about soup?
Yeah, more range than pizza. I don't think pizza's the rangiest of foods.
I think if you're going to put butter on a piece of bread and call it pizza, then anything could be pizza. I think pasta is just boiled, extruded pizza.
Here's a question for you that is very much tied to yesterday's festivities. Is a pizza bagel a bagel or pizza?
It's a bagel.
You're fucking right, it is. So here's the thing. Here we are, like chumps talking pizza, falling into the stereotype of pizza personalities. There's a few foods that this happens with, right? Like pizza. I do it with birria tacos, but I'm really more into the birria itself. It's not the taco specifically. Let's just get that out of the way right now. I like birria, quesadillas, consomme, you name it. It's not about tacos. But there are a few sort of, maybe it's a millennial-ish thing. I don't really think it was Gen X-y, but having a personality that revolves around pizza, tacos, pasta, it's kind of just those, right?
When you mean personality, you mean the person talking about it or the thing itself?
That it's like an indicator. It's a personality trait via, here I am eating a big slice of pizza. I'm a pizza person. I'm a taco guy. And again, I'm acknowledging my birria infatuation.
It's birria taco virtue signaling. Mm-hmm. I feel like
I'm complicit in this. I agree.
I think this kind of, if I kind of want to start this timeline, it would be food internet, right? Like Grub Street, Yelp, all this stuff. And then when we started sharing photos, it just became a thing. Is that when it started? Because I think Gen X kind of did it.
You could be right. It might be Yelp reviews. It might be Instagram.
The boomers did not do this.
No, it's not the boomers. Still, I'm not even a millennial blamer, but I do view the bird's eye view of coffee, a latte with a little heart drawn in it by your local corduroy barista. I do view that as more.
Shout out to corduroy.
Yeah, I love corduroy. As more millennial than Gen X.
So apparently, have you been following that TikTok is like pitting millennials against Zoomers in order to create traffic? What's this all about? Have you heard about this?
I guess I'm Team Zoomer.
I am 1,000% Team Zoomer, but not, to no fault of millennials, because I think every other generation has to deal with a pretty chill generation. The boomers were not chill. Gen X is notoriously chill.
I mean, some people have called them the most tranquil of generations, in fact.
The most trank generation ever. And then millennials had to dust their shoulders off and get their shots off. And then Zoomers are just like, nah, we're going to go back to that tranquility.
God, Gen X is tranquil.
A bit too tranquil. As we're watching all these like impeachment proceedings, I'm like, there's not a Gen Xer to be found. There's a couple out there, but you know.
Can a generation be too serene?
No such thing. No such thing. It's like,
I mean, punk rock, skateboarding.
that was kind of a boomer thing. That was Gen X. I'll give that to Gen X.
Gen X gets skating. Punk
Gen
rock.
X gets
Punk rock is probably boomer.
Punk rock might be boomer. 70s?
70s is.
That's boomer.
I think it's probably boomer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Skateboarding, rap music,
Modern art, contemporary art. Yeah.
loafing,
Oh, loafing? Weed. Weed is Gen X for sure.
mall culture.
I do love them all. The Simpsons. Shout out to the interns.
But back to the food personality thing here. Is that it? Are those the only food personality types that are prevalent? Is it pizza, taco, pasta? Like, you're a dump guy, but I don't associate you wholly with dumps. Are there any other ones that I'm missing? Like coffee a little bit? What else is there?
I think these three things are always used for jokes and talking, because it's tough to talk about. You don't want to like trigger vegetarians, so you can't really go steak. Tacos could be vegetarian, so like that works. Pizza works because not all slices are pepperoni slices. So I'm conscious of that. Like, don't talk about food, because I got a lot of homies who I really love who are triggered by meat talk, that big meat talk. So I think a lot of this is about that. And like a lot, like coffee is kind of like, is coffee classist at this point? Coffee culture, is that classist? Because that just makes you a Gen X, a millennial kind of Williamsburg hipster, right? Even though people everywhere drink coffee, but to talk about coffee culture just puts you straight into Williamsburg, right?
Yeah, coffee culture is Gen X because it's the big corduroys and like first wave baristas. But the photos, I think, are millennial. Gen X, we just wanted a cup of Joe, a nice cup of mud.
Yeah.
We wanted to go to the wall. There was flyers. We wanted to like pluck the little thing off of it that had someone's phone number about an apartment. I'm just thinking Verb Cafe.
We were still trying to think of like how we could identify with blue collar shit, right? Like, oh, I have this vintage gas station shirt that I bought from a thrift store, and I just want a cup of Joe, and I'm going to my record store and putting in 8 hours today and arguing about Jethro Tull.
Yeah, first wave coffee shops to me were not about class as much as they were about subculture, and then they became more about. I mean, there's class talk in that mix, but it was not about spending $7 on a coffee.
No. I have a tangential hot take that I just want to get off on the record.
King?
This is related to the Bucatine discourse.
Oh.
I think, there's new Bucatine news this week, as we found out. The same writer has gotten to the bottom of something, and a lot of it's corruption. Lo and behold. A lot of the inner workings of the Bucatine mafia. But
the seedy underbelly of the Bucatini tube.
Mm-hmm. But unrelated to that, I think the real debate will come, and it's coming. There's going to be a backlash to al dente. I think people are going to be like, all you guys, all these years, shaming me for my mushy. I like mushy pasta.
You do?
I do. I like leaving it in the boiling water for a minute longer because sometimes I'm not jamming with the al dente. It's two different things. So I want restaurants to be like, this dish is cooked al dente and this dish is not, just so I know, because sometimes I want that soft nude. And then I think it's going to be a class discussion.
You went from big meat talk to soft nudes.
Soft nudes, man. There's no shaming anywhere. And I think there's going to be a class pushback against people like, it has to be al dente. You can't put cheese on fish. And I'm like, you can do all these things. And
would
delicious.
You prefer it if restaurants asked you how you would like your pasta?
I would...
to move away from big meat talk into soft nudes, like to make that transition.
I would resist that send nudes because I think it's too hard to nail down. And when you're in a kitchen, I don't want to put that pressure. Like cooking a steak medium rare is hard enough. Whatever. It comes out.
Send this back.
Yeah.
It's not al dente. Tony Soprano does that.
Oh,
he
definitely
did that, yeah. He definitely did it. He definitely said this is not al dente.
Right. But he was just busting his guys' balls. Come on, that wasn't about the pasta. He was busting chops.
This fucking guy, you're right.
I'm just busting balls.
You were. He was. You and Tony are so similar in the way that you behave. You read him like a book if you read books. Which you don't, right?
It's like Jason Tatum's favorite player and modeling his whole game after Jordan Clarkson. I've modeled my entire dining life after Tony S.
So when you send back the pasta for being too al dente, I'll know this is actually not about soft nudes, but about your feelings towards, I don't know, perhaps the waiter or the kitchen staff or the owner.
Because fresh pasta is never al dente, right? You can't make fresh pasta the textbook definition of al dente, that toothsomeness, right? And I know when you boil dried pasta too long, it changes the flavor, right? At some point, there's too much water in it, and it kind of changes the semolina taste, whatever. But you can go like 3 or 4 minutes beyond the recommended al dente, and it's awesome.
I'm not sure about the first part, but that's my own unfamiliarity with making pasta myself. Like freshly made pasta, I'm pretty sure they can cook that sort of al dente, right? It's like as soon as it floats to the surface, you just take it off.
And this is my question. Is everything al dente? Because sometimes someone will tell me something's al dente, like fresh pasta. I'm like, this ain't al dente. It's like, I only cooked it for a second. I'm like, it's amazing. I don't want you to change anything about this pasta, but it's not al dente. No kink shaming.
Yeah, but this is really more about your feelings towards the cook, right, Tony?
Tone.
Come on, come on, come on, Tone.
Balls.
Come on, Tone.
I grew up with them. They're just busting his balls. I burned down his restaurant. Whatever.
Other than your crimes against your paisano,
Pizza homies.
did you watch the Super Bowl?
You know I love football. Of course,
Well,
I
you
watch the
do.
Super Bowl. I watched the halftime. I watched Tom Brady win his 7th ring. I watched Pat Mahomes, amazing. No Simbin, scrambling for his life, making these incredible football plays, but for naught.
I watched, I want to say like five minutes of it. I just threw it on for a sec.
Sure.
The only football game I watched this year was, I watched two. And I did not watch any other ones. I watched two of the Bills playoff games. Out of
The
some
Bills were
upstate
fun
solidarity. Out
this
of
year.
upstate solidarity.
Man, Josh Allen, that team is fun.
But my understanding was that the Super Bowl was awful from an entertainment standpoint.
For casuals. I mean, is a blowout in basketball hard to watch? I don't know. It's always kind of fun if you're into it, right?
Yeah, could be. Sure.
Okay,
I mean,
so-
right. Competitiveness is not what defines a game for being interesting. You could
Right.
have a shit game that's close.
I mean, it was fascinating every second of the game to me because all of a sudden we were coming up with new Brady takes and new Mahomes takes, and it was happening in real time. It's like, okay, we got to reconfigure our framework to talk about these two great players. It was billed as the greatest old player of all time and the greatest new player of all time. It was awesome, man. It was super fun. It just wasn't a close game.
One thing I did notice was that the stadium had a mix of people who I believe were vaccinated first responders, fans who I guess are not necessarily vaccinated, and then cardboard cutouts of people. There were a lot of comments on Twitter about, like, this is the COVID Bowl, COVID likes this, things of that nature. What was happening there from this dynamic of, hey, we're mourning all the people who died, also we have a stadium with a lot of people in it watching football?
I don't know, man. Everyone's an expert. I don't know what's happening. I don't think it doesn't appear safe to me, but it's probably fine because it's outside. But then these people have to walk through corridors and staircases and all that together, take elevators. But I don't know, and I'm not even angry that not everyone there seemed like a first responder or nurse, but like. It seems like some Dog Pound members were there, some Kansas City Chiefs Dog Pound members. You know, like some real fans made it, and I don't doubt that because
There was a guy walking in a Chiefs jersey with COVID written across the back.
that went kind of viral, and someone I think with the caption wrote the caption of like, "Football's the dumbest sport in all the world." I'm like, have you looked at other sports though? Like, have you heard of this thing called sports? Have you heard of this thing called human beings? Right? And I don't know, if you interviewed him, would he be like, I lost my father to it, so this is kind of just like a tribute to him because he wanted to be here. I'm like, whatever, man. Like, I don't care. Shaming is a tradition as long as COVID.
Well, longer, I think.
Well,
Shaming's been around for a while. COVID shaming.
whatever you say.
COVID shaming
You say, yeah.
has been around well before COVID. I didn't really get the whole dialogue, and I didn't really even understand the breakdown. But what was interesting to me was the idea that there are going to be increasing amounts of people in America, around the world, who are vaccinated. And, in New York State, for example, specifically now restaurant workers are able to get vaccinated. I know several who immediately went online, signed up, went in, boom, got their first shot. Cuomo wants to open restaurants
On Friday?
on Friday, just to warm up for Valentine's Day, I guess. But, like, there are people who are going to be vaccinated who are not going to have the same concerns necessarily about being in crowds, being in restaurants, being in bars. And I'm just sort of thinking about it, as this population changes, when it goes from being okay, it's just people on the front line to opening up to a greater society that's not the elderly who are kind of out of the mix anyway. Like, it's going to be strange when bars and restaurants are going to be open. We'll look at it and say, that doesn't seem safe. But perhaps 80% of the people in there are vaccinated. I guess what I'm getting to is there's not going to be one day where we say, we're back open, we're all vaccinated. It's going to be incremental.
Yeah, what did they say? It might take the world 7 years for herd immunity. So, hypothetically, if they're right, let's like bump that down to 5 years. You can't get on a plane without the COVID stress being with you during your whole trip, right? Like, it's just, life is different now, which is okay because...
Well, if you're vaccinated, I mean, I guess there's different strains that come into play there. But I mean, if you're vaccinated and you get on a plane, you say, well, who cares? If I get COVID, it'll be, it won't be dangerous. It'll be asymptomatic. But if I'm going to meet people somewhere else that are not vaccinated, then there's an issue.
I have had, maybe in the last 2 months, I have 3, 4. I've stopped being like deciding anything is true about it, right? And most of it is, like, I believe Fauci and all the scientists when they say, like, one vaccine is 50% successful versus this strain and that strain. But, I really balk at the idea that there is a direct way to behave in front of COVID. So if I get a vaccine, I hope to get one when my turn comes up, I won't feel that safe because I know there's amount of error involved, right?
I don't know, right? Because I guess the idea, of course, is that once a certain percentage of people have the vaccine, then the math changes for everyone.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's the idea. It's like, well, yes, you are 95% vaccinated. Maybe you're in that 5%, but now all those people in that 5% are just less likely to meet each other in a crowded bar.
Huge. And by the time I get it, thankfully, because I don't need one right now, but by the time I get it, it's going to be much, much, much better. It's already a lot better. The numbers look good. They're doing it since Biden took the reins. I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe it was coincidence. New York's numbers have been looking much better.
One of my buddies who got vaccinated said he really believed that the rollout was going to speed up. He's like, they have it down over there now. Where he
Amazing.
went. I don't think he has experience going to get vaccinated multiple times, but he was surprised by how fast and easy it was to get the shot. Even going online, scheduling it, walking in there, getting the first shot, getting a second one scheduled. He was like, "Oh, I think this is really going to work." And I was like, "That's really, really good to hear."
Yeah, and it's going fast. And you had that famous New York rapper, Huge Ma, that guy who was in the New York Times. He made he saw the rollout, this Asian guy, saw this rollout online, didn't really understand why it was designed this way and re-engineered it to, make it more efficient and started his own website. So you can go through his website as a portal to do other things. And he's, he seems like a really ethical dude, dunking basketballs. So, like, thankfully he's working for good. And all these little things are helping. And, like, the more we do all together, the faster it'll go. It seems to be going very fast now, though.
Yeah, I mean, from what we understand about the Trump administration, their mix of laziness, incompetence, greed, whatever the vectors of that would lead to ineptitude, but they had no plan whatsoever. So having people who are cognizant of or even want to make this work, like people who literally want it more.
Yeah.
It is weird though when you have people who are kind of random, individuals chipping in and saying, here's a site, because you kind of have to make sure they're good actors, right?
You need to vet everything for sure.
Hey, random people, put all your health information into my site and I will guide you to a vaccine. But like, who are you, man?
I know, and it just shows me sometimes how bad people in power are at things, right? Because even the lawyer at the impeachment, Trump's defense lawyer, I'm like, you're not even as good as someone who defends Michael Jordan in the bar. And he may be doing a thing. He may be like, I don't want to incriminate myself, or I don't want to get into big trouble, so I'm just going to be a buffoon and go home and just get my check.
Yeah, but he's from the private sector, right?
They all are. But, like, you know, he's in the House of Representatives defending a president who was just a sitting president a month ago. You would think he would know what he's doing, right? Like, he is in a position of great, great power.
But isn't this an argument, like, against the private sector? Just for this specific
Maybe.
discussion? I mean, this is literally someone that Trump is paying whatever $1 million who he's going to stiff in the private sector versus the government who looks competent, right?
Yeah, definitely on paper for sure. I just think he represents the president, so I'm just like,
But
whatever.
Trump's not the president.
A former president. So he represents a former president, right?
But he's
so
literally a private hire.
yeah, so literally yes, but as an idea, no, right? Like, sort of like, is that literally a slice of pizza? No. Is it pizza? Sure.
So your argument now is that they should nationalize
No,
lawyers.
that's not my argument.
Nationalize lawyers. All lawyers should work for the government, is what you're saying.
Wow, you're such a pizza extremist. Let's say. So let's just say
I'm just trying to pick up what you're laying down, Tom.
I know you are. So my feeling is these people with great power in this world who have consequences to what they're doing. This lawyer, there's great consequence to how this lawyer presents his case. I think he is the most famous lawyer on earth currently. He does not seem like he's necessarily good at this one thing. He may be a genius. It's yet to be seen. But yesterday he didn't present himself as someone who had a plan. And there's a lot of talk about why that was and what it's like to work with Donald Trump and all these things. And it just led me to think about, like, the people in that room he's presenting to Congress. What incentivizes people going there? And not to trigger anything. This is not about money, or maybe it is, but it's not about necessarily dark money. It might be just like legit success and moving up your social strata, whatever. Like, what incentivizes someone to do that thing? Because that seems like a terrible job to me. It seems like the worst thing in the world. You're just arguing about, is a birria taco a slice of pizza forever?
Well, I mean, I don't want to trigger you, but I would say there are a lot of people who are in it for careerism.
That's what I mean, like a strata, like moving up, constantly moving up the chain, right?
Well, I think it's just careerism, right? I mean, you have people who are fabulously wealthy from business endeavors who just view it as like a way to get more power, a way to be more important, a way to have more influence over society, over things they don't like. Sure. You know, and that goes from both sides of the aisle. Like, Nancy Pelosi's husband is worth $100 million, or they collectively are. She doesn't need to be in government. She doesn't. She's doing this because she likes it, because she enjoys having that power.
Yeah, we want that.
I don't think anyone is either inherently better or worse because they have money in going into government. You know, I mean, of course, I don't think a billionaire should also have political clout. Like, to me, that's just, you know, no one man should have that much power. But at the same time, you know, you could also argue that someone who has nothing is susceptible to bribery and the promises of corporate money following their career in office if they, you know, butter the right biscuits.
So, yeah, this kid, Huge Ma, Jack Ma, he's back. After his reprogramming, he's back. But Huge Ma, like, I think that's his name. Am I getting his name wrong? Anyway, he is a kid who's a software engineer who did this COVID thing, which kind of worked really well, got him in the New York Times. Kind of an amazing story. and it led me to think like what it incentivizes people to do that, because he should just be hired by the government. I think the government should be like, hey, do you want to work for us because you seem to care a lot about this and you seem to know what you're doing? We could really use you on our team. And he's like, sure, I make $400,000 a year, whatever. Or maybe he's like, I get to eat pizza in my basketball shorts at night. Can I still do that? Like, what incentivizes someone to take a government job to help a ton of people, right? And I listened to this podcast by that guy Stephen Levitt, who does Freakonomics. And when Obama took office, he was, people pushed him to work for the White House, and he's a genius economist. And he went through the process, and it just seemed insane. He's like, I had to answer this questionnaire that was like extremely offensive in private. It asked me about like my belief system, if I'd done anything wrong, to a degree where I just got through half of it and just like left it alone, because no life is worth that scrutiny. And I was like, that's a shame, because he should be a part of our government, because I'm a big fan of his. I think he would help a ton of people. I think he's awesome. And this kid who does this website, I think he would help a ton of people. He's awesome. But the incentive to work for, to be in that room as a Nancy Pelosi, who I think is fine. I have nothing against Nancy Pelosi. It's a different career path that I wish was more open to people like this kid.
Why isn't it open to him?
Because maybe he's just like, I would rather have fun playing fantasy basketball. Like it just isn't his cup of tea. So you have to convince people like him, being like, well, if you...
But I mean, are you talking about him just working for the government agency that creates websites? I mean, we're not talking about this guy being in the House of Representatives. He's a tech guy. Like you know what I mean? I don't get where this like differentiation of like how he couldn't be involved. Well, sure he could. What's the problem?
Well, he is involved, right? But he is not employed by the government. Allegedly, he just did this in his bedroom, and I'm sure he's getting offers now, but and he's doesn't seem like an Andrew Yang type.
I just don't necessarily get what the issue is. Like, he doesn't work for the government. He came up with this thing to make their website more functional. Sure, they could hire him to run that server to help them do their website design, because it was clunky and older people had trouble navigating it and signing up for vaccines, especially initially. There was an article about how some of the systems that were set up by the Trump administration did not make sense and were convoluted, especially in how vaccines were distributed to states and then within states. So yeah, there are people who have better ideas who can do it, but there's no roadblock to him actually working for the government. Like, he basically wrote like I'm using script both ways, but he basically wrote a script on his own time, and he's like, hey, government, like, are you interested in this? And they might say, yeah, sure, come work for us. I just don't see this being emblematic of any larger dilemma between the private and public sector.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the reverse. So this guy kind of doesn't matter in my argument. My argument is, how come the government didn't have this nailed down already? And it was such a clear issue where a private citizen was like, I can fix this. The government should be able to present the thing, sort of like Obamacare's website crashing on the first day. I'm like, that should never happen. Like, you should have people there to make sure that doesn't happen. And you should already have these nerds there, or people who are good at this, doing this stuff already. So when you roll out a vaccine, there's not mass confusion and calamity. And it takes... this is a deeply capitalist kind of, not to trigger, a Republican idea where like the private sector will do this. Like, Trump's whole thing was like, well, we'll just have Johnson & Johnson do this. I don't have anything. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a vaccine guy. Moderna will handle this rollout. I'm just going to support them with money. I'll buy it from them and they'll take it from there. But the incentive to do that, I think, is always dicey, because...
I mean, not to trigger you because you love billionaires and tech companies, but, we know how dangerous it would be to hand this over to the private sector. Like, that's
I don't
That's
think they
just-
should either. So I think these.
I'm just
nerds
saying,
should- yeah.
I just to be clear, I don't want to trigger you, but like, you don't want tech, unscrupulous tech companies having everyone's genetic information, having you can't put this data into the hands of monstrous tech companies. You can't do it.
And it's already happening, right? Like when you go to get a shot, like there is no security. I mean, security is one thing. I'm not talking about necessarily that. That is a free for all. That's already gone. I think we've lost that battle. But yeah, I wonder sometimes, like now that we've gotten past the Trump era, like how do we prevent something? How do we prevent this thing from getting worse instead of getting better? And I think it's to incentivize smart people to like be into doing what the government does, and that would ideally be help us, right?
How would you incentivize that?
I would make the ideas more abstract and stop arguing about things like language all the time, like there, or what the president means versus what he says and how serious to take him. I think if we start applying the government's energy to larger ideas like, greenhouse effect, poverty, all these things, I think people will come out of the woodwork with ideas, and you incentivize them with money and problems that they're interested in.
I mean, I don't know how the government like recruits for these things, right?
Yeah.
We've got the EPA. Like, how do they get their employees? How are they hiring people? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would presume, though, if you were someone who had a valuable skill set that could be applied to, fighting the war against, greenhouse gases, that approaching the government and trying to find a job would be the first step. Like, I don't know. Again, I don't know how the EPA does it. And the EPA may be recruiting. They may be having people contacting everyone who's, a major in fields that would be applicable. I just don't know. But I think ultimately, if we're going to say, well, it's just money, I mean, that's just not going to be the case. If people say, I could really help this planet, but it doesn't pay enough, I mean, that's just the deal with public service. I don't know how you say
we should change that deal, though. It's not like the sunset, right? Like we can offer these guys a more interesting path, right? And this is not even my idea. Economists have said this all along. You pay politicians more money, and it incentivizes a different class of people to take those jobs.
I think there's some truth to that. I think it's also shown to be untrue, completely untrue when it comes to cops. We've seen that, like that they actually just become more protective and more tribal and more powerful because they have money and they're well paid. So I think it can go both ways. I don't disagree that, paying teachers more money is ultimately a good thing. I think that is.
Yeah, it incentivizes people to be teachers.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm saying the downside, we can look at law enforcement, and it's like very clear that them making $300,000 a year with overtime makes them even more calcified in their resistance to change because they're getting rich and they're going to have, a beach house in Jersey at the end of the day and a huge pension.
And I don't like cops, so I'm not even pushing back against that. But that's corruption. I think that is real. What you're talking about has happened, and it sucks. But that's corruption, and I think this theory applies to cops as well. That's just my idea.
I mean, I know we've talked about this a while back, and I think that idea was something that I subscribed to when it came to law enforcement up to like a couple of years ago, and then it was like, whoa, this is just not true. And again, I believe that. I was like, yeah, pay cops more, you'll get smarter people, they'll become cops, it'll change it institutionally. I'm like, yo, no. No, I had no idea the amount of money they were actually making. I don't think anyone really did.
I mean, there is a lot of systemic corruption. Cops, the whole premise of policing is a dicey thing, and whatever. We can talk about it some other time.
You had mentioned the impeachment trial. I don't really want to get into it too much because I haven't been watching it. I've very little constructive to add. Here's my thing: is Trump going to have to testify or no?
No, he's going to be in the
fuck!
basement. Yeah, he said no.
God damn it! They've never gotten this guy on the stand one time.
I mean, why would you, right? So this whole process is a wink-wink. He's not going to get impeached. He is not going to appear before television. None of this stuff will happen. I'm reasonably interested in it. I'm a bit exhausted from Trump stuff, but and this is kind of relitigating like a lot of old stuff with new stuff. But yeah, he's not going to. Nothing will happen.
Yeah, it doesn't seem as if the Republicans are going to vote in mass enough to get him impeached. So it kind of feels futile, but I understand why there's a need to do it.
Yeah.
I feel two ways about it. I'm not really interested in the trial at all, other than I do believe, this is just my belief, that this was a de facto assassination attempt. So I am interested in getting the kind of people on the stand or testimony or evidence from the people who were around Trump and spoke with him, because I do believe this was an attempt to literally kill the government of the United States.
The Viking's going to testify. So they have the Viking turned.
But see, right, yeah. I mean, I want to know the guys who were talking to Roger Stone. I want to know the ones who were talking with Eric Prince from Blackwater. I want to know who was talking with Michael Flynn. I want to know who was talking with Bannon. I want to know who was in the brain trust who is pushing this and their relationship, say, to the militia movements, the Oath Keepers, people who were involved and had designs on going into that building and doing stuff and what was planned. I think that, to me, is just far more interesting from a sort of conspiratorial standpoint than Trump yelling, "Go over there, I'll be right behind you." Like, I want to know what they thought would happen and what some of the actors who broached that building intended on doing. That, to me, is really interesting. I don't know if this trial is going to get into that, though.
I love that they named their company Blackwater. That's like the Knicks naming their team. Like, we're redoing the Knicks identity. It's called Blackwater now. I'm like, it makes sense, man, because you guys sit in the dark and stare at candles and scheme weird shit. It's just like
Blackwater, sort of a toxic flow underneath the surface that, contaminates everything. Yeah, Blackwater.
It's like, don't drink the black water, and let's name the company Blackwater.
Toxic umbrella. What do you think about that?
My thought with this impeachment is this is kind of a misdirection on Biden's part, because he's trying to push all these wild bills through with coronavirus relief that I kind of love, a lot of them, like paying families back for funerals and up to like a few $1,000s, and getting rid of maybe $50,000 ceiling of student debt. All these things that Republicans really hate. So if you have them arguing and defending their guy the whole time, like, he's just like scurrying around like trying to get this shit through, and that's my theory, because they've talked about, like, why isn't Biden a part of this? He's like, oh, I'm up to other stuff right now.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be a coherent message from Biden, Harris, like their whole administration, that they're letting this occur. They're not basically paying attention to it. I think they even did like a press briefing while it was going on.
Good.
And I think that's right.
Yeah.
Like I think the New York Times phrased it as, like walking and chewing gum. Like that's,
always.
that they're saying
yeah,
we can do both. We're not going to get bogged down in impeachment stuff. So I think they're doing the right approach. Mm-hmm. It's not like Biden has any say over this, procedure or any clout or any decision making anyway.
Yeah, no, yeah. There's no use of having him
short
involved.
of like pardoning Trump, right?
Yeah. Or just like taking down his Senate rivals. Like, it just he could. I mean, if this was on the other way around, I'm sure a Republican president would really rejoice in, like, kind of reclaiming some seats in the House and Senate, through this process. But I'm pleased with the Biden administration's admission that this is an emergency, and so far they're acting like it. So whatever.
I'm pleasantly surprised by some of the moves that the Biden administration has made so far. I think the handling of the $2,000 checks, scaling back to $1,200, then means testing that for people's income based on 2019.
You mean
I think that's
1,400? Yeah.
I think that's just bad fucking vibes.
But he said that during the campaign that it wasn't going to be $2,000.
I mean, this is the kind of thing that it doesn't really matter, right? Like
Yeah.
the splitting hairs. You look cheap. You look like you're walking back the $2,000 check. I mean,
Oh, but this is splitting hairs because he said in a few months we're going to get more money. He's like, you're going to keep on getting checks. So
if
this
that's
will
the
be-
case, then just give people $2,000. I'm saying optically, this is a huge win, and I really do think the Democrats getting bogged down in who really deserves this, who should get it. Like, you're doing this wrong. If you're truly worried about the fascists and the QAnons and those fringy characters who are now inhabiting the Republican Party, just dump stuff on people to make them happy. The average American who votes for a Republican is not a QAnon advocate. They're just on that side. It's just picking sides. Good versus evil. Win them over. Win them over, Joe. Here's your $2,000. Don't say Uncle Joe never did anything for you.
Yeah, I think it's coming. I can only, all we have is what they say and what we think. But they keep on saying, like, there's going to be a lot. We're trying to get a lot through this $1 trillion budget, all this stuff. He's like, it's all coming. And they're rolling it out. And, he listened to the opposition. And he was like, we're not doing that. Your girl, I guess it was Murkowski. No, it wasn't Murkowski. It was, forgot, in Maine.
I mean, there's no reason to listen to Republicans about anything whatsoever.
Yeah, he took a meeting for an afternoon.
Yeah, and I think their approach, and at least when I've heard it described by their press person, has been like
Susan Collins. No,
right,
not
from Maine. Yeah,
Yeah.
What by their press person was that we are uniting the country. We're not uniting with the Republican Party to form one political group. So
Yeah.
I was like, that should be the approach.
Yeah.
Unity is not with the Republicans. Fuck the Republicans. Unity is between Americans.
I agree for sure. And so far so good. We'll see. So this impeachment, I don't really care either.
Moving on to basketball on the world's most influential basketball podcast. How excited are you? Your guy is back. You were a Derrick Rose day one.
Oh, I thought you meant Taj Gibson because I was like, been there, man.
He's been there.
I got that Taj glow for the last month.
Fort Greene stand up. Derrick Rose reacquired by Coach Tom Thibodeau in the New York Knicks. I think he was there 3 seasons ago, maybe something along those lines, 3 or 4. Was not very good.
The face of the worst era in New York basketball.
Pretty much. They did not give up a ton. They gave up Dennis Smith Jr., who does not seem to be a strong prospect at this point. Detroit may be able to rehabilitate him, turn him into
Hope so.
something. I hope so, for sure.
Yeah.
And a second-round pick that looks to be middle of the pack.
Like Charlotte's conveyed pick or something.
Yeah, and Charlotte's okay. So it does not seem like it'll be the 30th pick in the 31st pick in the draft or something like that. It'll probably be middle of the second round. You're the Knicks guy here. There was a lot of discontent from fans of the New York Knicks online when the trade was announced. Where do you stand on it?
It's like, we go with the flow, and now I think everyone's been convinced, like, oh, right, younger players, draft picks, all this stuff, the process, whatever. This wasn't a really big deal. Thibodeau wanted his guys, plural, and he got them. That's fine. Like, as you said, Dennis Smith Jr., although I'm rooting for him, was not much to give up, especially after drafting a guard who looks to be eating into the hypothetical Dennis Smith Jr. time, right? So it was adding a guy for Thibodeau's. It was an emotional support vet, as you say, right? It was someone to bring in that Thibodeau believed in, who understands Thibodeau himself, to teach these young players. He's a former MVP, so he has a lot of wisdom to bestow on these guys. Not my favorite player, absolutely not. Even in his prime, he wasn't my favorite player. But whatever. Like, maybe he'll lose the longest view in the room. Maybe they'll lose more games, probably. And Rose is going to be a free agent, so maybe they even flip him.
Yeah, my take on it was I do not really like Derrick Rose as a player. I like him less as an off the court personality.
No one lets him off the court.
I find him just a sour, negative presence to myself. I look at him, I'm like, I don't like that guy. I don't like what he represents. I don't like things he's done, and I don't hate him. I just do not like him. I don't know if repel is perhaps too strong, but I have a bit of revulsion towards Derrick Rose when I see him.
Sure, he's had a complicated off-court life.
I'm just like, don't like this dude.
Yeah.
But again,
People
he
do
gets
love him.
But I was going to say a lot of people really like him. Mm-hmm. A lot of people do. And when the Knicks traded for him, Dwayne Wade made some tweet about, how Thibodeau is going to get invited to the barbecue. Like that there was like a almost cultural
players only.
and racial benefactor. But that Thibodeau making this move is like, fist in the air, which I find another very fraught idea in this whole equation.
I did not factor that in, but yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not sure about that, D Wade. But that's how he feels, and that's, I'm sure, indicative of how a lot of players feel. But I'm with you on the overall importance of this, is that giving away a second-round pick is not great. There's no reason just to cough it up. But Thibs really likes this guy. And if we've seen anything about Thibs, he is an immutable motherfucker. He doesn't march in and say, yep, I'm just playing all the young guys. Not going to play people big minutes. Won't have Derrick Rose and Taj Gibson around. You hire Thibs, you're getting Thibs.
Yeah.
You're hiring Derrick Rose. You're hiring Taj Gibson.
Yeah.
You're going to play guys 38 minutes a game.
I just think the timing's wrong, right? Like, Thibs has proven to be a very good coach. Last time I checked this morning, I believe, the Knicks are number 1 in opponent field goal percentage, points, and 3-point percentage. Like, this is a Thibs effect, I think. I think he has pieces to help him through, but, like, this has his personality written all over it, and I just think it's a couple years too soon. It's funny, like, we say, like, well, the second pick is going to be middle of the second round. And it's just like, well, what players have come out of there? Like, Draymond Green was kind of high in the second round. Jokic was kind of middle. And Mitchell Robinson, the guy you got a few years ago in the middle of the second round. Like, he is the proof that pick could be valuable.
And also, I think it's worth remembering that second-round picks are not necessarily the player you get. They're
cash money.
Well, they're a trade chip, right?
Yep.
Like a lottery pick is worth $1. Mm-hmm. A late first-rounder might be worth 15 cents, and a second rounder might be worth a nickel. But you can use those to move up and down. You can get a guy you wanted earlier in the first round by adding that second rounder in. So from that perspective, it's more damaging than just saying, well, we're not going to get, the 50th best player in the next draft. It's saying maybe we'll miss out on a guy we liked because we didn't have that to flip in their direction, because our own second round pick is going to Philadelphia.
I mean, they loaded up
which it is.
Yeah, they loaded up for Obi Toppin to make a jump to him at number 5 or 6, and they didn't have to do it. So they know the principles of this, right? That would have been amazing if they bungled that and just happened to draft Halliburton. But like, they know the value of this because they did it last year, and not in the greatest way, but they understood how it worked. So. Rose's contract is expiring, so it's not a huge deal, and all this is like very inside baseball, and it probably won't result in another Mitchell Robinson. But that said, like the difference between getting angry at this move, the line between getting angry at this move and letting Thibs have what he wants, I'm like, it wasn't a seismic decision.
I don't think Derrick Rose pushes the needle either direction. He might be better than Elfrid Payton, but also maybe not.
Yeah, they're almost exactly the same.
Yeah, like neither one can really shoot that well.
Yeah.
They're both, Payton's probably a better defender.
Yeah.
Rose is probably better at, getting to the basket or whatever. I don't know. Excuse me. It seems lateral to me.
Yeah, and my only worry is I do think IQ is going to play more out of guilt. I think Thibodeau will be like, no, I did not salt my young guy. He's going to get 20 minutes, maybe even more towards the end of the season. My fear is like Rose isn't the easiest guard to play with on the court. And IQ running the show was electric, right? Like we watched that and I'm like, oh, this dude is fun. He needs the ball in his hands. He's not the greatest passer either, but he's trying, and we just have to find out what he is before we move on. And now we're gonna find out less, so that's a little annoying. But I'm just gonna say IQ is everything that we wanted, and let's move on. He doesn't even have to play that much more. I love him.
I mean, without shitting on Obi Toppin,
Do it.
I gotta, we haven't even seen him play.
He's fine. He's nice.
He's a jammer. Seems he's from, Westchester, like respect. But, after watching the Sixers play against Sacramento last night.
Oh, don't do this to me. Please, Hammer, don't hurt him.
Halliburton is just a baller.
Yeah, he's good.
It's just good. And if you would come away with that backcourt, I think.
Oh, you're rolling. That's it.
Yeah. Again, you got someone. You got a piece. But taking the obvious pick there with Halliburton and then having IQ, like, wow. You could look at that and say, this is our backcourt for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And we've got Mitch, we've got RJ showing some signs. Like, all right, it's kind of popping here. So I think one thing about Thibs is that, he's coaching to the team's strength. When he was in Minnesota, their defense sucked. So I don't think he's as simple as just being a defensive guy. Their defense was awful, but they scored a ton of points on those teams with Karl Anthony Towns and Wiggins and Jimmy Butler. They were good teams based on offense. And this Knicks team does not have very much offensive talent. So he's building them the other way, where you've got Mitch and you've got Nerlens and you have 48 minutes of exceptional defenders at the pivot. I think you could dig into their numbers and say, well, their defense is very much improved by the fact that opponents are shooting 32% from three against them, which is abnormally low. But hey, they defensively are top 6 right now, and like it is what it is.
It is what it is, and I think these numbers can be read at face value. And also, to your point, Tibbs being more malleable or changeable than we give him credit for, like he's sitting RJ more now too. Like, he might have said, all right, for the first 20 games, I'm going to find out what RJ is. And then recently this week, he's just been like, all right, buddy, you got to ride the pine a little bit.
I just don't think you hire Thibodeau without him being able to do exactly what Tom Thibodeau wants. And I think a coach of that stature, who's had a lot of success, who has a big name, who you're paying a lot of money, I think it's very difficult to say, Thibs, play the young guys, lose some games. He's like, nah, man, you didn't hire me for that. You hired me to be Thibs. I'm going to run guys into the ground. I'm going to go get my Chicago Bulls veterans, and I'm going to try to eke out as many wins as possible and get us in the playoffs.
It's kind of charming.
I mean, that's who he is.
Yeah.
There's no way he misrepresented himself. And was like, oh, yeah, I'll totally play the rookies 40 minutes a game. And then they hire him, and he's like, ha ha, Thibs time, bitches. Like, they knew what they were getting.
Yeah. And he yesterday, to his critics, he said, with Derrick Rose, he said one of my favorite lines. I think Daryl Morey said it in a podcast years ago, and I loved it. He's like, I think it was your boy Sam Hinkie. I just want good players. I'm interested in good players. Getting good players is my job. And I was like, that is such a reductive and awesome way to think about it. And to the Rose critics yesterday, to MSG, Thibs was like, I just like good players. I'm like, I know what you're doing, but you didn't get a good player. You got a friend,
Yeah, and the other part of this is we've seen him in a GM role, and he was really, really bad.
Yeah, that's true.
He was terrible. He was terrible. Yeah. So him having, more sway over the Knicks front office, not the best. His ability to say, give me my guy D Rose. We can wonder if that's the extent of his input, but even that is a little, hey, Thibs, man, you don't get to make that call. We'll bring in D Rose if we like him, not because you like him and you're fine with giving up a second round pick. So I think that's a larger worry. Is like Thibs is not a GM. He has a proven record as not being a good GM and not making smart personnel moves. What is his influence here? What is his say in Knicks personnel moves? Because the Knicks have this, congregation of people with unclear roles and who actually says yes or no to decisions. And are we looking at it now and saying Thibs is an important part of that? That's not great.
Yeah. Isn't this kind of an interesting era? Because, maybe for the last 20 years, the Knicks have relied on hope. And we've talked about this a lot. Hopefully this free agent will sign with us. Giannis will be a free agent this year. Hopefully KD will come. All this stuff. It's religious, right? Versus the opposite, which is maybe finding value in the draft and young players, which they have shown to do. Now they're in an era with Leon Rose, CAA, Kentucky, and Thibodeau with his guys from Chicago and Minnesota. It's like aesthetics, right? Or taste. You have all these people with certain tastes. Like, I dare them to let go of Kevin Knox and Nerlens Noel because they're Kentucky guys. And Nerlens is a CAA guy. Like, I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it because taste-wise, they're doing specific things that satisfy that need. Or I almost want to call it aesthetics.
I agree. They have been a somewhat incomprehensible front office for a while, and it's no less opaque now. Like, who makes the decisions? What's the worldview? Are you trying to win now? Are you trying to win later? What is the deal with all these Kentucky guys and the CAA guys? Like, what exactly is the kind of hierarchy of decision making? Like the decision ladder, or the decision tree, or however you would phrase it. Like, okay, if this, then that. I don't know where these choose your own adventure ass moves fall.
Yep.
When they go by page count. Like, what's the first decision that Knicks say? Did he go to Kentucky?
Yeah.
Is he CAA? Is he going to help us win today? Is he part of our future? No clue.
Yeah, like if you would have told me the Knicks, I would be like, okay, it's heavy metal with elements of rap. But then you throw in a flute, and I'm like, I don't know what we're doing anymore. I hear the heavy metal, I hear the rap, but is that a flute? And 2021 Knicks, people.
There's a song by, I want to say, the guitarist from Korn. Someone had mentioned it on Twitter as being one of the worst songs of all time.
Oh,
so I went and listened to it.
That's a high bar. Yeah.
I went and listened to it. It's called Child Vigilante. It's on Spotify. You can find it.
Right.
And the whole thing is it's an Eminem ripoff from the element or the era when Eminem was making very whimsical circus style tunes.
Oh, I love that era.
Sure.
That Dr. Dre era, right?
It's that era. It's before he got into the funeral dirge beats. It's the it's the big top era of Eminem songs, like
the Diamond Record era. Yeah.
Like Cut My Balls, Tom Green. It's all just
oh my god, he's incredible. Yeah, that's my favorite.
But the hyper juvenile style.
Yeah.
So Child Vigilante
bad.
is a guy who I think he's the Korn guitarist. And he is making a song that is about him pulling off pranks on people, like lighting paper bags full of poop on fire and leaving them on your porch, egging your house. Just a incredible record. So if you have Spotify, go listen to Child Vigilante.
This sounds amazing. This is the BC Boys, isn't it?
It is one of the worst songs of all time. Confirmed.
Is it?
It is
okay.
outrageous. Because he can't rap. It's about pooping in bags and lighting them on fire. It's a fake Eminem song. The artist is called Fieldy's Dreams, is his name, and the song is Child Vigilante. So check that out, listeners.
It almost sounds so bad. It's interesting. Like to me, I mean, this is a basketball pod, so when you say the worst song of all time, it would be like pick a KOBE song, right? I've heard some of those Iverson jams, and I know Stern wrongly squashed that record. But maybe not wrongly squash that record because those jams are a little tough.
A lot of gun talk on those Allen Iverson records for being the MVP.
Yeah, he's a gunner. But yeah, I mean, I gotta listen to this. Maybe with the I'll light a candle, I'll stare at it, I'll put on the Knicks game, rewind, and I'll listen to this jam in the dark.
It's that era for sure.
I love
And
it.
he's from Korn. I mean, a Knicks icon.
Yeah. I got my
Luke
corn
Cornett.
tapestry right here. Yeah.
Cornet, baby.
Cornette is your answer to a lot of teams' woes, and I'm with you, man. He's just sitting there waiting to be the corn savior.
Well, this sounds a lot like it's time for some Sixers talk.
Let's do it.
Because Cornet is a name that always comes up when I am discussing moves that the Sixers
Nick's
could make.
legend. You don't got to convince me.
Yeah, I like Cornet. He's been horrific this year, but he's barely played.
Yeah.
He's on Chicago, wilting away, squandering the prime of his life. So the Sixers played the Kings last night, and I was really impressed by Sacramento. They do not play a lot of defense, but they really run. They have exceptional speed, at many positions. Rashawn Holmes is a big guy, former Sixer, who runs the floor, catches lobs.
Harrison Barnes is pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, all these guys, Halliburton in transition is excellent, makes great decisions, and Fox is just a blur. I mean, I think the amount of guys who I've seen Ben Simmons not be able to stay in front of, I would say it's him and Trey. And I think Simmons is probably the best defensive player in the league. There's no shame in being 6'11" and not being able to stay in front of De'Aaron Fox and
His whole game is
and Trae Young.
predicated on schooling that size. Yeah.
But holy shit, those two guys are quick. Fox is just he is stellar. I think if
Is he
he was
faster,
in a,
like John Morant, do you put in there? Does he
Simmons can
remind
stay
you?
in front of him. Just I'm just really putting this through a Sixers prism. Fox, I think Fox is just quicker than all of them. Not speed necessarily, but quickness. The ability to change direction. Off the dribble, and then also once he's picked up his dribble,
He's
going to
twitchy.
Euro, getting beneath the basket. I mean,
Yeah.
he is astounding, and I went and watched a lot of his highlights. Obviously, I've seen him play before, but he is really a superstar.
Oh,
that's
interesting.
Kind of hiding in Sacramento in terms of his watchability.
Because we were. Yeah.
He's just a incredibly thrilling player because of his speed and quickness. He rules.
I think it's interesting because this summer we were talking about all these players in the same draft or in the same time in their career signing huge contracts like Jason Tatum, Brandon Ingram, Donovan Mitchell, Bam Adebayo, and De'Aaron Fox, all signed for huge money, deservedly. And we were ranking them. And the interesting thing with these players is they're still changing. And I don't think we had Fox that high. But he has turned into a wonderful player.
Yeah, he's not a good defender. He's not particularly efficient, but you just see that speed and quickness. You're like, well, defenses can't handle that.
Yeah.
There's not a solution for his mix of body control, twitchiness, athleticism, touch around the rim. You just can't really counter for it. I will say Thibault did a very good job against him in the fourth quarter. Had one great block, just kind of stuffed him to the ground and really contested his shots well. So, Thibault is an exceptional perimeter defender, and Fox couldn't really do the same thing against him. But just in general, I was really impressed by Fox and Halliburton both.
I have this terrible take that shaved head or short hair is more aerodynamic. So when a player shows up with a big awesome, I love those awesome haircuts. I'm like, oh, they're not going to be as fast. And this is just based off of vibes. I'm like, the hair is going to slow him down. And De'Aaron Fox shaved his head and became a lot quicker to my eyes.
I know. I gotta say though, he definitely looked cooler with the ninja headband and
I wish
and
he
braids.
had that. Yeah.
He kind of just looks like a normie.
Yeah, him and Kobe White were the Dr. Seuss All-Stars, and they were fast, and they did everything you thought they would do. They were gunners, they were fast, they left their dudes in the dust. And I don't know, is it the shaved head effect? This is a boomer-ass thought, I admit.
I mean, Alfred Payton, I liked him a lot more when he had his sculptural modern art haircut.
Coolest looking haircut. I heard it smelled awful.
I don't know about that, but I do remember the clip of him grazing his like jump shot with his own hair, which was kind of amazing.
Yeah, he did it for a really emo reason for his buddy, and I just heard that like he was sticking to it, and all of his teammates loved it, but they were like, "It's hard to wash that hair. It's just like a big solid mass, not Gorilla Glue mask, but just a solid mass."
Some brief Sixers talk. They remain undefeated in games where the full starting five have played, which is, I think, fairly impressive considering teams just kind of give up on games a lot this year. Like, everyone has some like really shitty losses, and the Sixers, when their starting lineup is intact, have none. They have not had those slip-ups where they just didn't have it and they gave up on the game, cashed it in, took that 20-point L. We've seen that happen to everybody, the Bucks, whoever.
Yeah, Detroit's been doing that to like a team every couple of weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Perfect example. The Lakers, went out and just got obliterated by Detroit or whoever. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe that was with Anthony Davis came back. Whatever the case. The point is, Philly has been remarkably consistent when they've had their five, starting members. And some really crazy stats from that group that reflect how good they've been are just, 99th percentile with outscoring opponents by almost 17 points per 100 possessions. Offensive rating of 121.8.
That's
defensive
good.
rating of 105. Just dominant lineup.
I heard this stat a few days ago. There's no duo in the NBA that generates more points than Philly's duo than the two LA teams. So they're number 3 behind those epic superstars.
Yeah, like you look at that starting lineup and you say, I know they haven't played, the toughest schedule. They have not gone against teams like Brooklyn that have had their roster intact. They've missed Durant and Kyrie twice.
That's a weird situation.
And as someone who follows the Sixers, it's a bummer. It's not that they've skated by. We didn't have to play those guys. Like, fuck, man. I want to watch this. I want to see Philly play against really good teams. Yeah. And thus far, really the Lakers are the only team they've played that's, elite.
And that was a close game, and they won, but it was close. It was what you wanted to see.
Yeah, so they do play Utah coming up, which is the hottest team in basketball, and just waxed the Celtics last night. So I'm interested to see how Philly matches up, especially against a team who has a center who can guard Embiid fairly successfully, or at least he can't just sort of, put over his shoulder and dunk through the hoop.
Yeah.
Like Gobert is, Defensive Player of the Year candidate annually. Mm-hmm. But the one nerd Sixers discussion I'm going to have here quickly is, I don't know what to do about these Dwight Howard minutes. He's not a component to a meal. He is all-consuming, and
he's gabagool.
But when you bring guys off the bench, ideally they're people who can just sort of fit in seamlessly with whoever is on the court. If you were making a stew, they'd be onions, celery, carrots, garlic, tomatoes. Oh yeah, just throw it in there. It'll be fine. Yeah, it'll be good in there. Oh, it's some greens. Yeah, sure, it'll work in the mix. He's venison. Whatever you're making,
whole dish, right?
Whatever you're fucking making, now you're eating venison.
Right.
Like Dwight Howard infuses your starting lineups, your bench lineup with gaminess.
He's an influencer.
It's just so much Dwight when he's on the court. And it's everything. It's offensive fouls, it's defensive fouls, it's turnovers, it's offensive rebounds, it's rim protection, it's blocks. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. It's just so much Dwight, which I don't really think is ideal at this stage of his career.
Yeah, and he's a bit of a ball stopper. This is a lot more Dwight than I thought we'd see. I thought he was going to be more of an emotional support vet, but he's a big part of this rotation.
They started him several games when Embiid was out, and the last time they kind of returned him back to his bench role and to play with him with some consistency in the same kind of lineups. There's some really weird numbers that I wanted to mention. In lineups where Joe and Ben are off the court, the Sixers have used Dwight alongside primarily Tobias Harris and Shake Milton and Matisse Thybulle. That's kind of been their second unit look. And this is an attempt to separate Ben from Dwight because both of them try to score in the same place, and Dwight, neither one of them can shoot, and Dwight kind of prevents Ben from getting to the spots where he is most effective, driving and dishing, posting up, catching, being a roll man. Dwight's already there. So they separated Ben and Dwight, I think, for good reason. But these lineups are crazy, man. Like, right now, statistically, that one that I just described is the best lineup in the NBA defensively and the worst offensively. They are the best at defending against the three, but take less threes than literally every other lineup in the NBA. None of that seems sustainable to me.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't make sense. I look at it and I say, I'm sorry. You guys are in the 0th percentile in attempted threes, this group. You just cannot physically take three-pointers. Like, you can't do it. Like, this isn't going to work. So even though they've had some success, I just view it as like a real problem area that the Sixers are kind of skating by on for the time being.
They do seem like they're skating by a little bit, and they're winning a ton of games. And, like, you go on a quick losing streak and you fall a couple tiers in the standing. So I'm not even talking about being a number one. But it looks like there needs to be a move. I don't like the idea of... I love Thybulle, and I think they should definitely use him defensively, but he's so tough offensively. And, he's a cubist. Maybe we're just not used to seeing a player like him. This is a new frontier, but the cool thing is I think Daryl Morey also sees this. I'm sure he's losing sleep over the fact that they can't keep up with speed. So it's so funny. In my mind, all I want him to do is find his new versions of Tucker and Danuel House.
I mean, I think Philly would be very, very, very tough to beat at any level this season if they have a good stretch five in the mix. And look, I was hesitant to trade Al Horford because he is really a perfect player for that role. But that said, Danny Green has been excellent, and he also is exactly the kind of player who they need on the court, and he's more important because he's in the starting lineup. But when you mentioned Luke Cornett, those are the kind of guys who Philly should acquire, in my opinion. That would make a bigger difference than trying to package together a bunch of assets and young players to try to get, I don't know, another creator in the half court. I think
you have the creators.
Find a tall, doofy white guy who can sort of shoot,
like an Olynyk kind of guy.
An Olynyk,
who's not available, but
right. I mean, Kaminsky, he might be available because they have Dario. You don't know how many of those guys you need, but. I mean, maybe Alonzo Spellman could fit, as Dave Early, our buddy, had suggested one time.
You mean Omari Spellman?
Omari Spellman, yeah. What did I say?
Alonzo Spellman, and I was like,
Who's Alonzo Spellman?
Is he an old baller? Is he a 90s head? I don't know.
Anyway, yes. I think he was he's a former football player.
Yeah.
From way back in the day.
That's it.
Played for the Bears, Cowboys. Anyway, yes, Spellman would be a capable stretch five. I think there's a few guys floating around that would not cost you too much.
Spellman doesn't have a team.
Yeah, Bjelica. He did not play a minute last night, so he could be someone that was clearly available.
Why did he not want to come to Philly that summer again? Just the money?
It was just money. Okay. Yeah, Philly offered him like something for 2 years, and Sacramento offered him more for 3.
I was trying to pin him as a cheesesteak hater, but it didn't quite work out.
I think he'd be great. But I do feel like Philly needs to make that kind of move just because to have Ben and Joe on the court together all the time, yes, your starting lineup rules, but there's no reason to do it. You have two guys that you can build entire offensive attacks around. There should be one of them on the court all the time.
Yeah, and I'm worried about Joe. He looks like he's languishing a bit. He's taken some tough falls, that flagrant foul, that LeBron James, that dirty, unethical play. Like, he looks tired. He looks in shape. He just looks like he plays for Tom Thibodeau. And to relieve any sort of weight on him, I think would help in the long run. If it costs, like, a couple of seed places, like, I would just sit Joe and lose some games for a while.
He did not look great last night. I think it was his worst game of the season. He did pass really well in the second half. But, yeah, early on, I mean, he was settling for jumpers. He was turning the ball over a lot. I also do think it's that effect that we talk about a lot, where fast guys make you look lazy. Fast guys make you look inept and slow and that you don't care.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, well, looks like Joe started caring again. Man, those guys were buzzing around all over the place. They were fast as shit.
I know. And that's a lot of criticism that the Nets are kind of absorbing now, that they don't care on defense, right? And they give up a ton of points. It's a skill, man. And when you're as big as Joe, your size is a skill. And when you can't keep up with quick players, that is a lack of skill. And it's not effort. It's not wanting it more. It's not hours in the gym. It's just skill.
Yeah, when Fox was zipping around Simmons a few times, but mostly Green because they switched to that matchup, and was just racing to the rack, yes, Joe looked slow and less engaged. When Thibault was keeping a body in front of him that gave that extra split second for Joe to come over and be in the way, all of a sudden he looks far more engaged.
Yeah. We read so much into it, right? Like, I really like Dwight Howard because he smiles a lot. Like, I love Steph Curry because he doesn't really seem to be bothered by some things that Derrick Rose is bothered by. So I love him for it. But, there's always the take that players like Dwight Howard and Steph Curry don't want it enough. I'm like, they're just smiling, but they might be smiling in frustration.
Curry does irk me a little bit, and I feel boomerly with it, with his celebrations after threes.
They're not cool. He's not cool.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's that they're not cool. I love a celebration. Give me a point. Give me a shimmy.
Let's
but
rank them.
His just are not cool. That little shoulder thing he did after hitting the one almost from the logo, I was like, ew, I don't want to see your bones moving like that. That's gross.
Is that a Fresh Prince Carlton dance move? I wasn't sure where that was from, and I was like, I think that's a Fresh Prince reference, but he doesn't do the spin out of it, so I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I don't know what the reference point was, but he just looked so bony. I'm like, look, I'm here for the big meat talk, but like, come on, you're looking a little scrawny, dude.
So there's skill in celebrations too, and like, I don't love Lance's guitar, but he was pretty good at celebrating. I thought J.R. Smith was kind of a celebrating genius. He was awesome. I don't know where Steph Curry ranks in that regard, but it would have to be in the lower tiers, I think.
I felt like some of his shimmies were cool, kind of in their heyday. But
Antoine Walker is the king, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But Curry would do those in the mix, and it was sort of part of their aura. They were unfuckwithable. They were too good. And, he'd hit a three and he'd shimmy. It's like, damn. And now it's you're like a 500 team. You're out here shimmying, hitting threes against like bad teams that are up by 5. I'm like, it just hits a little different.
We'll always disagree on Curry, but I think he's pretty amazing this season. But I thought
he's playing really, really well. 100%.
The best celebrator this year has to be your boy, your king, Kelly Oubre Jr., right? That little chef's kiss he got a T called on him for that. It's amazing when he hits a big three or a pretty three. They're all pretty.
It's like, a cream cheese brownie, mwah, peppermint patty day, mwah, National Plum Pudding Day, mwah.
He is advanced, right? Like, is he the best celebrator we got? Is he annoying to everyone, though? I mean, I like Kelly Oubre, but he's not a good player, and he's a little too pretty to be liked by the NBA crowd.
Yeah, you know what I think it is that bugs me about Curry's shoulder thing is that he makes it feel less special when he's just like doing it on a nightly basis.
Oh, yeah.
Like keep that as a treat, like a big game move. a winning shot. Just like, oh wow, you cut the Timberwolves lead to 4. You're shimmying, come on, man. Act like you've shimmied before.
His team would be insanely bad without him. Would they be a
no,
number 1 pick?
But like LeBron doesn't break out that weird thing where he like shoved down like 7 times and like made like a rock diamond. Like he did that like once.
Oh, come on. You're letting LeBron James off the hook for celebrating? He is the worst at it. I mean, he's given that up, but does he still do the powder thing?
Oh yeah, but that's Michael. That's Jordan originalism though.
Yeah,
100%. That's from MJ.
And that's also Nike probably being like, you need a signature vibe, and it worked. They manufactured that into a cool image, but it's like, what are you gonna do before the game that'll mark your entrance?
I mean, that was literally what Jordan did, though, right?
I think.
I'm like pretty much sure Jordan went and like brushed his hands off and threw like the little cloud up before games too.
God, I'm not even sure. Did he clap? I don't know. It was that might have been some pre-NBA stuff, but yeah, I don't know, man. I love.
It was definitely before Iverson crossed Jordan into obscurity.
Oh, when he ended Jordan's mortal playing life.
Shepherd him off the mortal coil with a ankle breaker.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Nets. A big loss yesterday, right? I mean, KD's in COVID protocol. Okay, first of all, I don't think we talked about this. That whole situation with him being held back and then being able to play and then being removed from the game again to go into protocol. Everyone got on the league for this, and this take is bad, but if we're going to get on the league for mishandling that, but we let the game play out after Kevin Durant may have contracted COVID, like, we're not allowed to have it both ways, right? Like, they should just shut the game down and send everybody into COVID protocol.
Yeah, hard to say on that one, right? Because it was a team employee who had taken him to the test.
In the car, right?
In the car. They weren't wearing masks. Then that guy tested, maybe he tested positive, then inconclusive, and then positive again.
Right.
There just seemed to be a lot of moving parts that added to the confusion.
Yeah.
And this was almost similar to stuff we've seen in the past where guys are getting their results in the game. You're like, can you just handle this shit before? Like, I know I know it's hard. I know you know there's science involved, there's testing, but like, just get this stuff wrapped up earlier in the day so you can make decisions before players are actually on the court. That's the optical issue here, right?
Yeah, and something went wrong that day, and I agree. Just like, get it taken care of. But maybe I'm talking about all the experts, all the COVID experts out there being like, the NBA really, they're on the NFL level of messing this stuff up. And I'm like, so you mean we should cancel the season now, right? Because these guys are going to get on a plane and go to Philly tomorrow night.
But it's also, like, when I'm talking about the optical part of being on the court, well, he was around his teammates all the time. And we're like, yeah, but on the game versus off the game. I'm like, none of that matters because he was already in a locker room. He was already in a bus. He was already in all these places. Like, there's no element of being on the court that is somehow more dangerous than all the other parts of his life.
Well, the part that's more dangerous is the other team being exposed to him, right? A whole other network meeting him would be the issue.
Right? No, I get that part, but I'm just saying, like, he's in the mix anyhow.
Yeah.
But that one was also a weird one too, because I don't know how often he was seeing this guy or when the guy tested positive and when they had been around each other previously. Because in the covert expert world here, right, if he had just seen the guy hours earlier and potentially got COVID, he wouldn't have had it at that point and risked giving it to his teammates because it would have only been a few hours prior. There would not have been a viral load enough to be contagious at that point because he didn't test positive because he literally tested negative 3 times that day. Yeah. So no one was actually jeopardized, and he probably could have just played that game out without anyone coming in any danger at all, except that doesn't work if he's been around someone who is tested. Like, it's all just a protocol that trying to do the best job you can while keeping guys playing during a pandemic. Yeah, man, sometimes guys are going to come on the court and get pulled off.
This might be the highest degree of difficulty thing to pull off, right? In a pandemic, have 29 teams and one relegated team all play each other with like coaches, family, and we have these tests, but they're kind of inconclusive sometimes, and the thing is mutating, and I'm like, oh, this is impossible.
And another wrinkle, Katie's like, dude, I had this shit. I have antibodies. Like, oh, yeah, that's true, but
We're
know,
not
maybe
sure
that was good
anymore.
for 3 months,
Yeah.
but you had them 9 months ago or almost a year ago.
Yeah.
Like, there's just a lot of moving components here. To be honest, I didn't think anyone was really jeopardized based on the information we had. But I also think the real thing is get all the testing done before the games. Guys can't play until the testing is done. But
Yeah.
then again, it's like, this guy works for the Nets. Who is he? Is he someone's like weed carrier? He's just a guy who's driving him around? Who is he? And is he getting tested in the same facilities as the NBA, or is he going and waiting in line at City MD and he's like, all right, I got it. It's inconclusive. Everyone's like, fuck. All right, can you go and get another one? All right, I'll do it right now. Okay, KD, we're going to say you can play.
I mean, we're all doing this, right? And we're all experts because we're all walking that fine line being like, I want to get what I want. I want to go to this birthday party. I want to go home for Thanksgiving. I want to eat this meal. I want to be able to go to my supermarket. So I'm going to construct a way to make this work. And we
the
want
NBA's
these
like,
games, right?
yeah. And the NBA's like, are we going to really pull one of the biggest stars in the league out because of
Yeah.
an inconclusive test?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Shit.
or the NBA is like, we don't want to cancel the season because it's kind of working, right? I think they're doing a great job, but you cannot do a great job.
I mean,
you know?
it's clearly working.
Yeah.
Now, the conditions by which the players are forced to live is my main objection. From a safety standpoint, I think they've done a good job, but that's what happens when you can test people like constantly. And these guys can stay secluded for the most part away from other people. And yeah, they are living in a very different world than the rest of America or the rest of the planet. But yes, they have done a reasonably good job at preventing guys from getting sick, or for whole teams specifically from getting sick. But they live under really draconian conditions. And,
Sucks.
you know, I think having an all-star game is pretty tone deaf, in my opinion.
I don't understand that either. I do understand that. David Stern. I always say David Stern, but Silver, I think, is like, we have ways to do this safely. We're not going to put anybody in jeopardy. More so, and this is a really important ritual we go through in the NBA. If you consider all of this is a ritual, right? Like, none of this. Obviously, I'm a Knicks fan, so win, lose, who cares, right? You mortals who worry about your all-star games, but like, this is important to somebody, and it might be him or the owners. I don't think they should have it, but if we're going to get on the All-Star game as being a meaningless act, isn't this all a meaningless act? Not to be a stoner 420.
I mean, of course, sports are all meaningless. Like, sure. But the All-Star game is literally
Meaningless.
an exhibition. Like, it doesn't matter. You can certainly name an All-Star team. Guys can have that honor. They can get
They should
whatever.
get their contractual shit.
I
Yeah.
was about to say, yeah, okay, I get a bump in my salary from being an All-Star. Absolutely. Of course. Do the voting. Do the whole rigmarole. Do the arguments. All of it. But you don't actually have to have them come out and play. And if the consensus is from players who are going to be named to the All-Star team that they don't want to do this, they would rather just have a break and be around their family and stay at home and chill out for a week versus going down and being tested all the time just so they could have an exhibition game. I think the players' wishes should be respected in this regard. But clearly, it's about money. It's about television rights to the All-Star game. It's about the Taco Bell Skills Challenge. Like, there are other components to this that go far beyond players' feelings about whether or not this game is meaningful.
And, a lot of that money is the league needs to stay healthy, and I can accept those terms a little bit. But also, we shouldn't forget that the Players Union agreed to this. So the NBA owners aren't forcing players. Michelle Roberts and Chris Paul had negotiated this and agreed to do it. And, as I always say, it's not like gravity. We can go back on this agreement because these are special times. But Chris Paul wanted this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, he's also not going to be there.
He's like, I'm not an all-star this year. I mean, just
I'm gonna be at home with my family and my loved ones. You guys are gonna be in Atlanta. Yeah, have fun with that.
they should just like skip it and have. I mean, viewership is not gonna change here, but just like announce all-stars for teams and give them little like trophies or jerseys ceremonially. Let them wear the jersey for a week.
I mean, if you're gonna do it, I think you have to make it like encouraged, but not 100% mandatory. Like if you want to go play in this, you can. But if you're Joel Embiid, who has, a relatively newborn baby, and you want to see your family instead of going to Atlanta to play in an exhibition game, you can do that too.
Yeah, it's at that point, if you're an all-star, and these teams are small, if you're an all-star and you don't want to go, they should just call the thing.
I mean, look, there may be some guys who are first-time all-stars who I want that pomp. I want a big bowl of pomp. I want some circumstance.
But do you expand the rosters? Let's say the superstars. Let's say 3 out of the 5 starters like Giannis and Joel don't want to go.
Yeah, they all have newborn kids.
Yeah, and do you expand the rosters by the amount that don't want to go? So
just let all the Celtics on.
Julius Randle, all-star.
Just Celtic after Celtic. Jaylen Brown, absolutely an all-star. Oh, Tatum, how could he not be there? Kemba Walker?
Jordan Clarkson.
The salsa dancer?
All versions of Jordan Clarkson. Did you watch that Celtics game last night? Bits of it?
Did I watch any of it? That one I did not watch. I was watching other games last night. I did not watch the Celtics because I saw they were getting annihilated by the Jazz.
They came back. They made it tight, but the Jazz had a little fun separating again. It was light work. The Celtics, beyond all leprechaun stuff, the Celtics look like in the tier of like above the Knicks. Like they could absolutely, they should beat the Knicks every time. Will the Knicks beat them sometimes? Maybe. The Celtics, like Jaylen Brown got hot last night to the detriment of Tatum. And I was talking to you as I was watching some of it. And this is not the leprechaun bit. But can they coexist? There's redundancy there. Not because they do the same things, but because they kind of do the same things, right? They kind of take turns doing the same. And I looked at the shot charts. Their shot charts are very similar. They take the same kinds of shots. Tatum maybe from longer range. But it's not like when they're playing a team like Utah, when it's like Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, where they do two distinctly different things, but almost present the same value as a standalone.
We talked a lot about the Nets having some potential redundancy issues because they're one of these few teams that has championship aspirations that is just built around shot making. Like incredible high-level shot making with Kyrie and Durant. And then adding Harden, another guy who does some of those same things, but is also very acclimated to having the ball in his hands. And how does this work? And is there redundancy there? Would you be better off with an Andre Iguodala style player who kind of does the small things, plays defense, plays off the ball, cuts well, gets out in transition, than one of these, incredibly gifted individual scorers? Maybe. Mm-hmm. I feel like Boston is a worse version of that. And I don't mean that they are specifically that much worse than Brooklyn. Their records are about exactly the same. And I do think Brooklyn's probably better than them when they have a full, healthy roster. But they're built the same way. And that Brown, Tatum, and Kemba are all that same kind of player. Except they don't do the passing part. They're all just individual scorers. Okay, what are we doing this possession? Tatum's going to try to score and shoot a mid-range jumper. Okay, next time down. All right, Kemba's going to come off the screen and pull a mid-range jumper. Next time down, Jaylen Brown's going to drive in and shoot a little fadeaway out of the post or something. They just kind of do the same shit all the time.
And it should not be ignored that the gamer god, Gordon Hayward, and their second best player, probably Marcus Smart, are no longer with the team currently. And Smart hopefully will come back. I hope so. I really love him. But like those two players did what you're talking about. Like
Yeah.
Hayward was kind of a different type of scorer, right? He saw the floor a bit clearer. He was into education reform primarily. But he had a mind to pass a bit more than these two guys who are kind of valves, who are finishers, right? And they're good players. They're both going to be all-stars this year. But when you watch them play a balanced team with Joe Ingles draining shots and Rudy Gobert protecting the rim and Donovan Mitchell doing the Jordan Originalist thing, like that strikes me as a balanced team, especially when they have Conley back. When I look at the Celtics, I'm like, oh, they really miss the gamer god.
I mean, I think Kemba is playing far below where you would expect, whether that's a product of his knee and whether he's going to improve substantially. He's been a terrible scorer this year for a guy who is typically a good scorer and an explosive one. And despite the fact that he's a poor defender, when he is a poor defender and a poor scorer, Kemba doesn't help you that much. Yeah. So hopefully, Kemba's knee is not a permanent condition, but he is, 30 years old. But but it is kind of what you said before, the idea of players coexisting. When we heard it about Philadelphia so much, it was just based on the fact that Ben Simmons doesn't shoot. That was it. It was, oh, well, how can they coexist? Ben Simmons can't shoot. And I think that's a very childish way of looking at redundancy. Mm-hmm. That's boring. That's not paying attention to what guys actually do on the court.
Yeah.
Well, how do Bam and Jimmy Butler coexist? Neither one of them shoot. Oh, well, I don't know. Brown and Tatum are kind of the same weapon.
Good weapons.
They're good weapons. They're good weapons to have. But if you were breaking into a safe,
right,
and you have to have some tools, well, you're sitting here with two drills. Okay, use that drill. This isn't working. All right, try the other one.
Yeah.
But it's the same drill.
All right.
Yeah, but it's a different one. Okay, true.
Yeah.
And I'm fully in agreement about Gordon Hayward being that connective tissue, that he was not a shoot-first player. He acted sort of as the real point guard in terms of being patient, looking for other guys, and everything wasn't based off of the primacy of his own scoring and then making plays after that. Tatum gets the ball, he's looking to score. Mm-hmm. He makes that move. If the defense reacts, maybe he'll make a pass. I think he's passed fairly well this year.
Yeah.
In comparison to seasons past.
Yeah.
He's looking to find guys. And, that does work, but it's not the same as getting the ball and looking at and looking around and finding a matchup.
Yeah.
And saying, wait, we can score over here. We got a mismatch. I need to get the ball into his hands. All right, hold on. Let me survey, the terrain in front of me and figure out what our best possible shot in this moment is that's not reliant on me just beating my man off the dribble. Mm-hmm. So I think you are right. And I think Hayward's absence was even felt in the playoffs. So I'm not really surprised by that impact right now.
Yeah, and I think as a overall trade deadline thing, I think people should be really wary and make sure they want Bradley Beal, because what he offers is a gettable resource, which is volume scoring. And of course Bradley Beal will throw in those amazing passing nights, and he's a really awesome player. He deserves a max contract. He's going to cost a ton to get. But beware of getting him, because I think there is a potential for redundancy in a player like him where there isn't with a player like Lonzo Ball, who will cost much, much less. And without contracts, without even thinking about age, what they provide you for a run is very different.
Look at the teams who go to the finals. Look at the teams who win championships. I know that's a very binary way of approaching roster construction.
But it's a metric. It's fair. Yeah.
But the teams that are really good and consistently really good, none of them are built around that kind of player. None of them. None of them are built around this sort of generic, high scoring, excellent scoring wing. They just aren't. The only one that you could say is Kawhi Leonard. That's it. And
But he's an excellent defender.
but he's one of the best defenders of all time.
Yeah.
And he's like an incredibly good shot maker from all over the floor.
Same with Dwayne
And
Wade. Yeah.
his 2 titles have been parts of the Spurs machine and with a Toronto team that would have lost. That easily should have lost to the Sixers, but easily could have lost in that finals if Golden State was healthy. And that was a good fucking team. That Raptors team was stacked.
Yeah, but they got lucky twice, for sure.
So Kawhi, as great as he is, the best possible example of that archetype, the two-way wing, the conventional two-way wing, is not only better defensively than all of them by a lot. He's freakishly good defensively, is an incredible scorer, and basically got lucky the last time he won it.
Yeah.
Just got lucky. Got lucky multiple times in that playoff series to some degree. But all these other guys that fall in tiers that are well below that, the Tatums and the Browns and the Ingrams and the Bookers and the Beals, there are so many of these guys, and they're all really good players. They're all really good. But like, there's a reason that archetype does not win championships as the best player on a team.
And I love these players. I loved Anton Jameson. Like, he was kind of my guy. I loved Antoine Walker. But, right, it is a kind of player that will win you a video game, an NBA video game, because all their attributes are pretty high. But when you look at what works IRL, it's what you're talking about. All these players on these great teams have outlier skills. Whether they be visible easily, like a 3-and-D guy, a unit or multitasker in that way, or if it's a player that does little things. Like Dwayne Wade is not one of these guys, right?
I mean, Wade was a phenomenal defender, but Wade was also a really good passer.
He's a good passer. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, he was a good defender too.
I mean, Wade is a good example, of those guys. I will absolutely concede that. But Dwayne Wade is also incredibly good. Like, Wade was crazy good.
So, right, and this is what I love about 2021.
And he had Shaq on his team.
right. The ultimate outlier, right? But 2021 is great because, like, you could be Zion Williamson. You just have to be a nuclear Zion Williamson, and then you have value. It's like, it's not good enough that you shoot 80% from the floor. You got to do that and score 40 points a night, and then all of a sudden you got something going. Like, you cannot just score 15 to 20 points, right? Because your liabilities kind of purge the value of your one outlier skill. And if Bradley Beal were to help a hypothetical team like whatever, the Sixers, he's always rumored to go to the Sixers for Ben Simmons. If that happens, that team probably decreases their chances of winning by 70%.
If you actually did that trade, which there's no reason to believe that Daryl Morey would ever in his life do, the Sixers are probably cooked.
They're back to the Boston tier. They fall down a whole tier from a contending team to what's next year going to look like, right?
Yeah, you don't have anyone who can run an offense. You don't have anyone who can set up teammates. You don't have another exceptional defender in the mix. Like, it just they'd be significantly worse with Bradley Beal. But I just look around the league and there are so many guys who are good scorers and like not horrific defenders, because that's been the prototype for basketball players. And I do think there's a romantic attachment to them that goes back to the Kobe and goes back to Jordan originalism, that we view those guys as being the keys to winning, when in fact they aren't. That, Kobe was really good, but he won because of Shaquille O'Neal, and he won because of Pau Gasol. And he won because of Lamar Odom and Andrew Bynum and Ron Artest and Derek Fisher and these stacked fucking teams that the Lakers had.
Yep.
And he was great. And he was that player. But those guys alone don't turn you into a great team. Before they traded for Pau Gasol, Kobe missed the playoffs. Yep. Kobe was out in the first round. He couldn't do it. He couldn't just will his team to being great by virtue of his excellence. LeBron can do that. James Harden can usually do that. And there's just a difference between that tier of difference-making guys and, to me, the conventional two-way wing who basically plays pretty good defense and scores a ton.
Yeah, and I don't think Danny Ainge is ignorant to this. I think Danny Ainge knows this. And it's a good problem to have. These two players in Boston, this is what you want. You hit on them in the draft, and you pay them, and you retain their services for a long time. And then you look at last night, and you're like, we have no chance of winning a championship with these two. Like, we had no chance of beating Utah in a 7-game series.
I mean, it's hard to get pairs of exceptional young players. It's just really difficult. And, Philly picked the two guys who would have been number one in their draft class, had Embiid been healthy. That's 1-1.
True.
Like, they got them, the two best players, who were available in the draft. They got both of them in
It's crazy. It's
the
crazy.
course of 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And that's just the difference
And they
between
got Fultz. Oh,
Yeah, but I'm saying, but sometimes you miss, right?
Yep.
Sometimes it doesn't work out. Those guys worked out.
Yeah.
And if you took Brown and Tatum, there are people who would say, I think that duo is better than Embiid and Simmons. There are certainly people who would say it. They all work
Most
for
people.
ESPN. I don't think that duo of Brown and Tatum with replacement level guys around them is a 50-win team. I just don't think they have oversized impact on being a really good team. And that's what's so rare about Joe and Ben. It's not that they are so great as individual players. Their impact is oversized. And you look around the league at young guys, Doncic and KP, that's not really a 50-win team just with those guys. Obviously Karl Anthony Towns and D'Lo, nope. Towns and Wiggins, nope. So
Yeah.
comparing the guys the Celtics have to, as I think the interns may have, to John Wall and Bradley Beal is, to me, fairly appropriate. Like, you hit. You got them. You got good players. They're really good. They're excellent. You nailed it.
Yep.
You developed them. You paid them. Now what?
Yeah. Sucks.
Because those teams were good. But not because Jaylen Brown was good. He wasn't.
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown was not good in years past.
Yeah.
He was a mediocre or bad player early in his career. Tatum, not that great early on. It's all right. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But those teams were buoyed because they had Al Horford and they had Kyrie Irving and they had Gordon Hayward and they had Kemba Walker last season.
Yeah.
Like, that Boston team is not based around the excellence of Brown and Tatum. It's been based around the excellence of the other guys.
Yeah.
The ones who combine for more than one All-Star in their career.
Do you think the way this Boston team is constructed now is a team identity that echoes Antoine Walker and Paul Pierce? Do you think, aesthetically, it is something they were interested in, being like, remember this team, guys? I mean, they didn't win, but it was a joyous time to be a Celtics fan, and I think having these. A big guy is awkward, a small guy is too small, short king. But having two forwards is they've seen it, it's worked, and it's appealing to them.
It's funny because if you asked them, they probably would have said, we're going to build the big three again. We're just going to, it's going to be Kemba or it's going to be Kyrie. No, they went and built the Paul Pierce, Antoine Walker gang again.
Kind
Get
of,
Dino
right?
Raja back. We're doing it.
Walter McCarty, I don't know. Yeah, I always think there is some Antoine Walker erasure, and I just wanna think about Twan a little bit more.
I can't say that was ever a great player, but he was a interesting one, and
I loved him.
that volume of threes at that level of inaccuracy is really remarkable from a guy who was 6'10".
Yeah. I mean, I have yet to look back, but didn't he have some good seasons in Miami?
And won a chip.
Yeah, and he was not a pivotal part of that team, but he was good. He gobbled minutes.
He started.
Employee number 8, Corliss Williamson.
He started.
Yeah, he started, and he was such a cool player, and I loved him, especially because Moneyball was a thing, was back then, and he just looked like he didn't belong on the basketball court. He's kind of upright. The best celebration I've ever seen, which is that zombie walk, which is just incredible.
It's worth mentioning that Antoine did play the prime of his career when the NBA was in its dead ball era, and league-wide true shooting percentage was at 50. Right now, it's currently at 57. Right, so all those guys, when you look back and you say, wait a minute, he was an all-star with a true shooting percentage of 49%, and then he was an all-star with a true shooting percentage of 46.7%. Like, get the fuck out of here. They do not hold up well under the scrutiny of today's glare. But he was just a little below average, in terms of efficiency
For sure.
in that time. So you can cut him a bit of a break, but he was not he was not that good.
We're butting up against hour 2, but I need to drop the Kevin Garnett quotes. What'd you think of those?
They were lovely. He's got a book coming out. He had an interview in the New York Times. I thought his perspective, specifically on the topics of yesterday's players versus today, were really insightful and were very refreshing in comparison to the kind of verbiage we hear from Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal on the average night. His recognition that guys have different skills today, that guys do things that are very difficult, physically challenging, that they just could not have done at that stage because it was not required of them.
Yeah, and Garnett knew that he needed the help from a magical stone through the path of Jewish mysticism and Midtown Manhattan. It wasn't he would have no chance in this era without the magical jewel.
Yeah, it was the only way that he could step on Elton Brand's fucking neck.
Yep. I think Area 21 wasn't like my favorite segment on the TNT presentation. It reeked of like kind of clubhouse barbershop talk with like old heads. Mm-hmm. Old heads that I love.
I think that was the entire point. All right, we're going to get two outspoken guys and have them riff.
Yeah, like when Rasheed Wallace was on there, I just love those two guys. But Garnett coming out with that point of view was like surprising and refreshing, right? And I think it'll happen more and more, but he's right about everything. Hand checking just makes the game easier. And without hand checking, all the parameters of this game change. And the defense gets smarter. Therefore, the offense has to get smarter. And that offense that's been developed now would run circles around his era.
Yeah, and as we always describe, I mean, I do think hand checking is a big deal in terms of perimeter defense. Sure. No doubt. But the game is really, really physical in the paint right now. Yeah. I mean, these guys are all doing years and years of weight training. They're all ripped. They're enormous.
Yeah.
And
they're skilled and they're fast. They're not slow.
Yeah, their collisions are really violent. Yeah. You see guys battling in the post. They are the pressure or however you would say it, like two cars running into each other. Like the energy that's generated by collisions in the post, I would say are far more terrifying than those back in the 80s where these guys were skinny and they were kind of like lowering their shoulder every now and then. Like these guys really have mastered, for the most part, how to collide and do a lot of damage without pushing off with your arm or without noticeably, shoving the guy away.
And it's a classic Trump thing, it feels like to me, when great players of earlier generations are like, the game is tougher. I'm like, just because you got angry and missed a haymaker, like you missed your target and you like ended up on the ground, doesn't make you tough. I've seen the games. It's just like they're tougher now, but there's just no like punching.
Yeah, I agree. There's less flagrant fouls. There's less fights.
Yeah. Well,
we did it. We reached the 2-hour mark. Should we head for 3?
Okay. It wasn't the perfect pod yet, but let's make it. Maybe it is.
What about now?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yep, it's perfect. We did it.
Okay.